I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Yes, yes, yes. What's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like right here on Black Power Media. BPM is back in the building. I am Jared Ball, your host. Very happy to be back once again. Have a very, I think, important and exciting show coming up in a few minutes with Barrett Brown. But there is, and I've asked his uh, patience to give me just a few minutes to start with something else this morning that I'm going to get to in just a moment, because I just watched the big payback episode of Atlanta about reparations. And yeah, want to talk a little bit about that before we get moving. First of all, greetings to everybody who's live with us this morning, all the remixers. It's good to see you. Those who will see this later and hear this later on all your favorite podcast platforms, peace and welcome to you as well. Do all of the things, all of the violent metaphors to support the program and the channel. Smash, punish, destroy, all the violent metaphors, pounce the join button, all that good stuff. And then, of course, blackpowermedia.org and get you some of this merch. Anyway, I hope everybody's doing at least as well as could be expected. Definitely, if you haven't already, check out. I posted a lot of stuff over the weekend. Please check that out if you haven't already. To those who have, thank you very much. And to those of you who have shared some supportive, almost all the comments, particularly around the audio posted around my mother and father, have been positive. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Constructive criticism is always welcome. A couple people, you just got to remove a couple comments, block a couple people because they want to take the opportunities to go a little left. But because I am, and we are a political family and can handle certain things, I don't mind sharing certain things about my life and my family and my family's history, especially because I do think it is interesting and politically relevant and of value. And those who want to make good meaning of it, it's there for you. Others who want to use it to take your shots, enjoy yourself. Enjoy yourself. And it is very tempting. I did want to say this. It is very tempting to go into the whole thing of, you're doing it, anonymously and at, behind a digital screen and not to my face and all that kind of stuff. But in all honesty, at this point in my life, I prefer it that way. I got no armies and no soldiers and no crew. I don't want anybody rolling up on me, sharing their opinions to my face. I don't invite that anymore. I don't want any of that. So stay behind the screens, and then I can just delete the comments and we can move on. But anyway, for everybody else, mostly it's been really supportive. I appreciate it. So thank you all very much. Please continue to share and enjoy that work and all the other good stuff that I posted and that others are posting and have continue to contribute. The Warrior Class episode this weekend was great. Again, Sundays seemed like it was dope, but I had to miss it, so I have to go back and check it out. And I hope others will do the same, or you all enjoyed it while you were there. It's not that people take issues with the interviews, but they I mean, you know what it is. I mean, and I get it. I have very Black radical and sometimes nationalist politics, and not everyone in those communities, understandably, to a certain extent, appreciates that coming from somebody born and raised by a Jew, and they wanted to share their comments. So I get that. And on some level, and this is something I would want to come back to, I think, in more depth, and that's sort of what I was kind of even wanting to say about the conversation we had with Omawale the other day. There's more that I would like to come back to, because I think in both of those instances, there's a lot that is misunderstood, and the nuance in my position and arguments is not accepted or appreciated either. Because people, I think it's much easier to fall into very narrow, constricted concepts of everything. So but that's really it. Um, but yeah. But it's all good, and some of it you can be expected. I mean, sometimes you share, you share certain things, and in these public spaces, in these streets, and it is what it is. But anyway, but it's all good. I appreciate, and in all honesty, without some of the vitriol, some of the basis of the critique of my position and relationship to some of these politics and histories is, I think, legit and valid, and I'm here for it. Uh, but not just as a sounding board for people's, silliness. And then the other thing, lastly, on that is that I think there's too many people that are more interested in a personal "I got you" victory than actually winning. And I'll just leave it at that. But anyway, so yeah. Um, uh, yeah. Anyway, um, and yeah, you know what? But that conversation was for me, and I want to continue to have it. So we're not always all going to agree in these spaces and in these communities, but I think we can't avoid the conversation. We need to have them, and be willing to have them, and even disagree. So I'm going to come back to that. Um, uh, but Omar Wale seemed, we even had a follow up, a brief private exchange after the fact, and I think Omar Wale himself missed the point I'm making about there's a difference between what is said to be queer theory, and for me at least, and an acceptance. There's a difference between what is said to be queer theory and what is said to be, um, in which some to a certain extent I agree, a power structures liberalizing agenda, and on the other side for me, the acceptance of all members of the African community in the community. And that part for me isn't really negotiable, but that part is a little bit of a nuance that not everybody appreciates or can understand or wants to listen to. So it is what it is. Um, Fair enough. Yeah, no. In the exchange we had privately, I think he missed it. I think he missed it. I think a lot of people missed it, and some of the people that got at me afterwards, I think missed it. They're not here for the nuance, and they're not outright rejecting it, because anyway. But anyway, so but I want to get to this thing real quick because before Barrett Brown gets here, um, and just share a couple of thoughts about this, because I did watch it, and I enjoyed it. So did you all see the big payback episode, the Atlanta episode, or the episode of it, the show Atlanta? Um, I want to Let me just share this part before I get to the specifics of my thought, just so if it gives some background here. In this one article I found, Justin Bartha breaks down Atlanta reparations episode. What would reparations actually look like? That's what this week's Atlanta episode titled The Big Payback attempted to depict, and Justin Bartha, who plays Marshall Johnson, a run-of-the-mill middle-aged white guy, is at the center of it. Bartha is known for his secondary roles in films like National Treasure, Geely, and The Hangover, but he really excels and leads this episode, and it is one of his best performances to date. The episode was written by Francesca Sloan and directed by Hiro Murai, and its unique exploration of what reparations. Actually, I don't agree with that. I don't agree that it's unique exploration of what reparations could mean for our society if it ever comes to fruition. The characters in episode 4 are learning about a black man winning a lawsuit against a Tesla executive whose relatives enslaved the man's ancestors. Similar to a recent racism lawsuit against the car company. The Big Payback is another reminder of the deep symbolism and historical references that have made Atlanta the show that it is, especially in season 3. While Ern, Darius, and the rest of the crew are learning what it's like to be black in Europe, Murai brings viewers back to America to show what the future could bring. All right, so that's all that I wanted to share from that article, just to give you some of the background, the basics if you didn't see the episode, and don't therefore know what it is I'm talking about. Let me change that background there we go. Uh, so I think that was all I had from there, right? Yeah. Yeah, because the rest of it just goes through. Oh, no, 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 I'm sorry, there was a little more. Okay, right, this was I'm sorry, right, 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 glad I checked. Um, uh, so the question here, thank you. The conversation about reparations has been ongoing for years, but I haven't seen it depicted on TV or in movies in this way. Do you think this represents what could be or what it might look like in the future? And do you think that's going to worry some people? This is where I was saying that I think the episode does not, sort of break new ground with the discussion of reparations. You haven't really seen it before. That's what makes the episode so exciting for me. It opens a conversation and it's up for the interpretation, and hopefully people will talk about it. I don't know if I'm really in the place to speak on it, but obviously the conversation has been taken in the modern age fairly seriously since Ta-Nehisi Coates' Atlantic article. I remember reading that when it came out, and then I revisited it. I know that there are people like Cory Booker who are trying to push ahead the conversation within our political system. It is something that has always seemed like an impossible thing. It's hard to read that Ta-Nehisi Coates article without really having a serious conversation about reparations. If Atlanta and the brilliant people who work on the show and put the show together can bring that conversation to more people, it's worth a worthwhile venture. All right, so that's why that was. I'm glad I remembered to check for that note, because that was really where I wanted to sort of, I guess, dig in my own response to the episode. Um, First of all, that the episode starts as first. The first note I have here is that when the episode starts, you see that the white dude that they're talking about is in line at some coffee shop, listening to his earbuds, listening to NPR, which I thought was perfect. Um, just with my own views of NPR, the equivalent here to what Frantz Fanon said of Radio Alger in Algiers during French colonial control of Algeria, creating for the white affluent liberal a sort of sense of place and a justification for their colonial rule. So that was a perfect, I thought, opening for the episode. But my next note here is that ultimately this episode is an anti-reparations propaganda piece, as it narrows the discussion to the most narrow definition of reparations and prevents more radical concepts of an improved world. So this is almost always maybe my only issue with reparations as is popularly discussed in this country, where for the most part, the emphasis, even in lampooning it, whether it's on Chappelle's show or elsewhere, is an emphasis on and a reduction of the issue to direct payments to Black people. Now, the episode doesn't get into how are Black people defined. It doesn't get into the soda versus the reverse hashtag argument. It doesn't get into Tariq Nasheed's FBA stuff. By the way, if you are a member of the channel, please go check out the Saturday Night Live version of Members Only that we did this weekend. Members Only of Not By Myself, where we looked at some of Tariq's. And for all that he gets wrong everywhere else, as I pointed out in that episode, Tariq Nasheed's understanding of hip hop history is among the most atrocious of his incorrect analyses that I think I was surprised by how bad. I don't agree with almost anything else he says. So I guess I shouldn't on some level be surprised, but I was surprised at how bad his understanding of hip hop history is. I mean, it's really, really bad. Um, like first day elementary school bad. I was like, wow. Anyway, but they don't get into that. They don't raise any of that in this episode of and who's determining who's, so the only thing that is done in the episode is that apparently the government has made it possible for people to do research into their backgrounds, and if individual Black people can find individual white people to whom their ancestors were owned by the white ancestors, they can appeal or demand of those whites some form of payment, and it can be I apparently with government involvement and support extracted from these white folks, including from garnishing their paychecks. So it reduces again the issue to individual checks, uh, and then leaves it in this episode much like I think the discussion is meant to be had popularly. It leaves the issue of again individual checks, and the individuals themselves have to go about the research and the collection and the confronting um, uh, of those individual whites. So it doesn't really, the episode doesn't really get into again who is determined to be qualified for reparations, in terms of how much the reparations payments, like what formula, and then uh, how you're going to exactly go about getting them without creating a hostile, uh, personalized exchange. And then, of course, the episode ends with, oh, by the way, couple spoilers. So I guess I should, if you need to skip this, come back in about 10 minutes when Barrett's here, or five, and when we start with Barrett. But um, it leaves everything to this again, this very individual, and that's sort of the point I'm thinking why I call it anti-reparations propaganda, because anyone watching this, uh, uh, particularly whites, but I would think anybody else who watches this, the idea that on some level it could be fun, yeah, to track down the whites that owe you some money and then chase them down, and then like the sister is shown in a very, I think, stereotypical, lampoonish way of being the hood sister named Shaniqua, who just is the stereotype, chasing down the white man and demanding her money, and then the episode ends with where you see all the whites doing all of the service work and black people sitting comfortably in a nice restaurant. As I note here, though, but again, so this is what I'm saying. Why I'm saying it's anti-reparations propaganda, because again, even when you see the white collapse, and suicide rates, in the show, which some might find kind of, I mean, a little bit humorous, etc. And then the brother says to the white dude, that watches the white dude kill himself, that there's going to be more of that, and so on and so on. It's again suggesting this massive wealth transfer that is destroying the lives of whites to the point where they would kill themselves, and creating a material condition for black people, again, that suggests a reversal of roles. So, it's included in what I've already said is not dealt with in the episode. What is also not dealt with in the episode is what was the political movement, what was the political process that led to this being adopted and accepted? What would have had to have occurred for this to happen? What would have to occur for a society such as this one to accept even the level of white suicide rates, uh, uh, in favor of a wealth transfer over to descendants of enslaved Africans? What would have had to occur here? And that's where, and because, for instance, this is what I'm saying: white people, if to the point where they're being pushed to suicide, they're not going to simply kill themselves and and give up all their money without a political, if not other form of conflict. So I would have liked to, and when it's just left out there like this, white people, of course, are going to see this and become defensive and more recalcitrant and less likely to engage a political process, which reparations advocates must recognize as necessary for the political process to accept that transfer of wealth. But it also doesn't address the political power in all of this either. It does. So are we then to assume that whites have given up control over the political apparatus, have given up control over the dominant sectors of the economy and control over the economy? Have they because that's somewhat suggested in the episode, but is not engaged. So again, to my concern, black people get a check, and as is discussed at least in part in the episode, whites feel like we've assuaged our guilt and can move on, and society can sort of march on as it is, just now with black people benefiting from the capitalist imperialist exploitation of the planet and other working people. And then, of course, it showed some Black people still doing their service work and more menial labor. So, what does that mean? That these are non FBA reverse hashtag folks? Or does this mean that they couldn't find the proof necessary to collect their reparations, or the whites that they tracked down whose ancestors owned their ancestors were not sufficiently wealthy to transfer any meaningful? I mean, none of this is really, so the episode just sort of assures, I think, a permanent and increased hostility. Then they do a lot of other little things that I have a problem with that we can come back to in another time, like how are whites determining who is white? And the one Ashkenazi Jew in the show says, I'm an Ashkenazi Jew and I'm proud of it. Therefore, and since we were enslaved, that's proof that I didn't own any slaves and couldn't be, called in by someone Black in today's United States to extract wealth from me, or a transfer of wealth from me. Again, I don't always agree with the emphasis of some sectors of the Black community who put on Jews, but to suggest that Ashkenazi or other Jews were not involved or at some point benefiting business-wise or through direct investment or ownership of enslaved Africans, that's not historical. Same thing with the white woman who said her people were from Peru. So are we saying but again, if your people's ancestors enslaved people outside of the United States, then perhaps that's what, I don't know. So that wasn't really dealt with, I thought, properly, or well, anyway. So all of that said, this is why I keep saying that we should want more, and that reparations should be institutional. It should be something it should be a part of our assuming political power and really being focused on changing the society, not just benefiting differently from an ignoble and hostile empire that is exploiting and extracting from us from within, our diaspora abroad, and creating the kind of inequality that I don't think we should just be thinking to sit on top of. Anyway, so it's just not big enough. And again, I think that it's just going to reduce the discussion in pop culture to where it really is. And white people are going to be encouraged to fall back into their recalcitrant position of, I don't want to give up my money. Why would I support anything like that? And it encourages, I think, Black people to organize specifically around that issue as opposed to something larger and more radical. That's what, so. All right, those are my 2 cents on that. I'm happy to come back to that. Let's take a quick transition, and please put your comments in there. I'll happily come back to it later on in the show. But let's take a quick break and come back and get into surveillance and infiltration and issues related to that with Barrett Brown, right here on I Mix What I Like. Back in a second.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.